Welcome to this AAI training video to walk through Atomic Automation external dependencies and how AAI can help you visualize these dependencies and the critical path of your workflows. By the end of this video, you will understand how Atomic Automation visualizes external dependencies, as well as how the critical path is displayed from the Atomic Automation web interface. We'll cover the challenges involved in monitoring these workflows from within Atomic Automation and how AAI can help display these same processes in a way that make both the dependencies and the critical path easier to understand. First, let's walk through a fictitious use case to help us understand how these features can work. We have a company, Vunair Airlines, that manages air travel all over the world. They have flights in many geographical areas such as Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and other countries. They run many of the same processes for each location. For example, sales, advertising, payroll, etc. There are separate Atomic Automation workflows for each geographical area. Although most of these processes are specific to the geographical area, there are in some cases dependencies between them. For example, payroll, in red, which runs within a main EMEA workflow, cannot start until all of the advertising processes, in green, for all geographical areas have completed. Atomic Automation uses a feature called external dependencies to manage these dependencies. We can see the main EMEA workflow here and the payroll process in red, waiting on the advertising processes in green as external dependencies. We can also see the critical path of the main EMEA workflow. Critical path jobs stand out in the foreground, while non-critical path jobs are in the background. However, it is not possible to see the details of those external dependencies that the payroll process is waiting on. This can't be seen without opening up each of those specific advertising workflows. This lack of visibility causes problems for the operations team. They lose time opening up multiple workflows and trying to understand the dependencies between them. Following the critical path between the multiple workflows is also a challenge. As we will see, AAI job streams can help solve both of these challenges. The AAI web interface makes visualizing the critical path much easier by designating each critical path job with a red icon in the expanded view and red boxes in the Gantt chart view. Red lines between the boxes indicate the dependencies. This is visible across workflows, including any external dependencies. Now we will go into our demo training environment and walk through this use case directly in Atomic Automation and AAI. We will look at the objects in Atomic Automation, specifically at the external dependencies and how they appear when monitoring the workflows and displaying the critical path. We will clearly show the challenges involved and then display the same thing in AAI, showing the differences and advantages. Here we are in our Atomic Automation system. Let's take a look at the workflows that depict our use case and the Vunair geographical hubs. We can see a folder structure called Expenses-Windows and subfolders for each of the geographical hubs. Each workflow for each geographical hub is essentially the same. Remember, we have our sales, scheduling, and advertising processes, just to name a few. However, we know that the EMEA workflow is different because it runs the payroll processes. So let's look at that one. We see the external dependencies to the other geographical workflows by looking at the white rectangles with dotted lines. Inside the rectangle, we can see the arrow icon, which indicates an external dependency object type, as well as the XTRNL short name. As we hover over each external dependency and view the object names, we'll see one for each geographical area: the UK, France, and Finland. Now let's head over to the process monitoring perspective. We have created a master workflow which contains all 4 geographical workflows: EMEA, Finland, France, and the UK. This master workflow is managed by a C-period object, and the C-period object is scheduled to run every 2 hours. The master workflow has just started, so let's monitor that and take a closer look at the EMEA workflow. We see the external dependencies have an initial status of waiting for predecessor. Once the workflow gets to these processes, it will verify that the external dependencies in the other workflows have completed. If they haven't all completed, the workflow will wait with the status of waiting on external dependency. Only when all external dependencies have been met will the workflow and the payroll process continue on. Let's click the Show Critical Path button. Now we can see what jobs are on the critical path for this specific EMEA workflow. However, what about the critical path for our other geographical hubs? Unfortunately, this is one of the limitations we spoke about earlier. It's just not possible to see the entire critical path from this view. What we can do is look at the other workflows individually by going back to the master workflow and monitoring one of them. Now we can click the same Show Critical Path button to see the critical path for this specific workflow. So it's certainly possible to view the critical path for each workflow, just not all in one place. Let's go back to our EMEA workflow. We can see the workflow is almost to the external dependencies. And now it has reached them. As we can see here, the EMEA workflow is now waiting for the advertising processes in the other geographical areas to complete. Now we see the advertising process for Finland is complete, but the EMEA workflow is still waiting. Remember that all the advertising processes for all the geographical areas need to be completed before the payroll process will begin. Let's head over to AAI and see how this process looks over there. We're in the Monitoring tab. The Monitoring tab is where we can monitor job streams in various statuses. Here, we created a new tab with a filter specifically for our process, which has now been converted to an AAI job stream. We can find the currently running job stream by looking in the Type column. Currently running processes are blue with a line in the middle of the rectangle. We can see that this currently running process is forecasted to complete early. This could change as the job stream progresses. Let's look at the Gantt view of the job stream. On the left side, we see a list of all the jobs in the job stream. Our EMEA workflow is expanded. However, the other geographical workflows are not. Critical path jobs have a red icon next to their job name, so they are easily identifiable. In the Gantt chart, each job is indicated by a rectangle, and the critical path jobs are also highlighted using red rectangles. The flow of the critical path is shown by red lines between the critical path jobs. Even without all the workflows being expanded here, we can see that the critical path is tied together between the Finland workflow and the EMEA workflow. The red line shows the connection between the two separate geographical areas, even though they are in two separate workflows. We can even expand the Finland workflow and see the specific critical path jobs in that workflow. The gray line shows us where in the job stream the current processes are actively running. The forecasted completion time is indicated with the solid blue line. And finally, the average end time is indicated with the dotted blue line. The Monitoring tab indicated that the job stream was forecasted to complete early. And the Gantt view also displays this with the various lines, as we can see that the forecasted completion time is before the average end time. Remember that this is a dynamic forecast. As the job stream continues to run, this view will be updated with the most current predictions. This single pane of glass view will greatly assist the operations team in being able to clearly see what upstream processes can impact the SLA. This will save time. The critical path across multiple workflows using external dependencies is now much more clear. Thank you for watching this quick training video on AAI and Automic Automation external dependencies.